Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading all things Charles Band podcast. If you're joining us for the first time, yes, you have stumbled across a Charles Band podcast, and I'm sure you are ecstatic to have found the show. I can only imagine. And so we are very happy to have you. I am one of your hosts, intergalactic trivia host who always reminds you to reach for your dreams, Jared Hornbeck, coming to you from Brooklyn, New York. And who is here reaching their electric dreams with me?
Well, it is I, Steve Guntley, the Slut Slug. And this is a podcast about Venusian man-beasts, electron showers, and things in the sand. That's because this is a podcast about Vicious Lips, a absolutely insane cult sci-fi musical from Schlockmeister Albert Pyun, who we've talked about a few times on this show. Oh boy, is this a movie and a half? I think we're going to need to go into it, and I think we need to bring in some help on this one. So who is joining us on this episode today?
Well, you may remember our guest. He is a return guest to Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks. Last time he was here, I believe he was dwelling around that cellar with us a little bit. But we dragged him out of there, and it was we had to, because in order to really fully dive into this movie, we need the most vicious-lipped of all returned guests. And we found him in Doug McCambridge. What's up, Doug? Thank you for coming back, man.
No, thank you for having me. It's an absolute blast. I know it's a last-minute thing, but I was more than happy to jump on. And I really want to know the weirdo that this is their first episode. They typed Vicious Lips into their podcatcher, whatever, and they found this and are like, what a wonderful entry point.
I imagine they were trying to Google Vicious Nips, okay, and then this one came up, but it was a typo. But either way, we're glad to have you here.
Either way,
that's a Jim Wynorski joint, not an Albert Pyun joint.
Exactly. Yeah. Either way, but you don't type that into, I don't know, Apple Podcasts. I mean, that's a real Google
It's
search
funny,
there.
yeah, Doug, because I wasn't even really thinking about someone coming into the show that way. I was thinking more like, it's my friend told me about this Full Moon and Empire podcast, but I like your way better. Like,
we were discussing full moon movies around a game of baccarat when your podcast came upon my lips. Yes,
and I said it as a joke, but I've discovered shows that same weird way. I will type in the most obscure film that I enjoy. I will search for podcasts just based on guests' names, and then just dive into the shows that they have guested on. So I know it was a joke, but honestly, if that's why you're here, I appreciate you hopping by.
Oh, absolutely. And we appreciate you hopping on. Like you said, a little inside baseball, but we've had quite the shuffle of schedulings with the Vicious Lips episode. And we really wanted to get it in because Jared and I both watched it and we're like, we have fresh steaming hot takes about this movie that we just have to get out into the world. So you were kind enough to jump on. Now, on your podcast, Good Times, Great Movies, you do deep dives into every film of the 1980s. Have you come across this one yet before?
No, so much so I didn't even know this was a thing. I really didn't. Jared, I think I reached out to you to try and grab a title that was already taken, and you're like, hey, while I have you here on Instagram, can you hop on in a few hours? I didn't even know this was a thing, and I started watching it, and I'm kind of glad I didn't message you, because about 15 minutes into this, I was like, I love this. This is amazing. And then things changed not too long after that.
That sounds like your normal. Yeah, I think that's kind of the normal way that you experience this movie. It's real peaks and valleys, but which is, not surprising for an Albert Pyun movie. Because we'll get into a little bit what makes this thing outwardly, inherently an Albert Pyun movie, like front and center. But before we do that, Steve, why don't you fire off some stats about this movie for us?
I sure will. Vicious Lips was sort of released in February of 1987. It was written and directed by Albert Pyun, like we mentioned, and it stars Drew Ann Perry, Gina Calabrese, Linda Carriage, Shane Ferris, Anthony Kent, Christian Andrews, and Marianne Graves. Truly, this was a hard movie to research. Now, the one theme that we've stumbled upon this show, the one consistent theme over and over, is that Charles Band has very little shame about the movies that he puts out into the world. And so it's kind of noteworthy when there's a movie that he doesn't seem to have been particularly proud of. Now, this was a pickup for them. Albert Pyun had already shot the movie, and then Empire picked it up and distributed it. But when it came time to release it, they gave it like 3 or 4 very small theater like test screenings, basically. And then when those went poorly, the movie was just completely dumped. And I don't mean dumped onto VHS. I mean dumped. There was no VHS or home release of this movie until 2013, when Shout Factory dug it up and released a fairly bare bones Blu-ray edition of this movie. So this is kind of almost like a recently unearthed movie in a lot of ways. Definitely one that I think if people have been going back through the catalog of Albert Pyun's work after his death recently, you might be curious about some of these early movies in his filmography. And this is definitely one of the strangest ones. And, Jared was kind enough to share a little snippet from the book Empire of the Bees, which covers a lot of this. And they discuss this as kind of a bit of the turning point for Albert Pyun's career, at least his mainstream career as we knew it. Now, he had burst onto the scene a couple years ago on 1982 with The Sword and the Sorcerer, which was a surprising hit movie. It was made for like $4 million and made something like 40. It was the #1 highest grossing independent film of that year. So believe it or not, there was a little period here where Albert Pyun was like a hot in-demand director. And people are like, okay, let's see what he comes up with next. And the thing he came up with next was Radioactive Dreams and Dangerously Close, which are two kind of really hard to describe sort of neo-noir, futuristic, post-apocalyptic comedy detective movies. It's kind of a mess. It's like a little bit of everything is in those movies. Did I miss any genres in that one, Jared?
No, you didn't. And Radioactive Dreams is a movie that is it Electric Dreams is the one with the Tangerine Dream soundtrack?
Yeah, I believe so. No, Electric Dreams is like a legit movie.
That's the one with the computer, like the sentient computer. Yeah.
Radioactive Dreams is a much weirder beast entirely.
So Radioactive Dreams is kind of a cool movie, actually. I think it fits well in a double feature with Trancers, with the first Trancers. I think they share a lot in aesthetic. And themes, like motifs throughout the movie. I think those two go really well together. But I mean, you're right. Albert Pyun was a commodity at the time off of the success of Sword and the Sorcerer. And also, in addition to that, he kind of had this weird storied background, which was that he came from Hawaii, but then when he was 18, he worked under Toshiro Mifune and Akira Kurosawa.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
And so,
yeah,
right. So he had this
common DNA between Vicious Lips and The Hidden Fortress.
Yeah, basically, because Takao Saito, who is the camera person for Kurosawa, didn't go on a project with them, and Pyun sat in for him basically and kind of learned on the job, which is super cool. And then I think, given what we see happen with directors who kind of hit it out of the park their first time around, they get some good grace for a while and kind of a blank check for a little while. And that's what happened with him. And then Radioactive Dreams was just such an utter debacle in terms of barely getting finished and not being the lucrative hit that they thought it was going to be. And he sort of felt like, I can do this on my own outside of the studio system and do it for cheap and do it fast and make the movies that are my vision. And, I'm curious what exactly that vision is when it included things like Cyborg and his Captain America movie, which I will say, and I think I did this when we had our arcade episode, because we didn't have a ton of nice things to say about the movie Arcade, but I think we all kind of came to bat for Albert Pyun as a morbid curiosity, if nothing else. Yeah. And I think his Captain America movie is not a good movie, but I think it's an overhated movie.
It's really interesting because Albert Pyun makes very, very bad movies, not even enjoyably bad movies. Some of them are very noticeably bad, right? But they're always good to look at. He is actually a talented filmmaker, but he is maybe just rushing or like not editing or not like slowing down. I don't know what it was about his working style, because he clearly knows how to frame a shot and how to shoot and how to like make the movie look comprehensive and good. Even a movie like Vicious Lips, which really falls apart in the story department, but it's consistently like interesting to look at.
I have to say I was, and maybe it's because it was released on Blu-ray, I was shocked how good this movie looked. I mean, I'm just watching it on Tubi, and at every turn I'm like, why does this movie that I've never heard of, that is honestly not very good, why does this look so good? I was really surprised. And I have to say, I looked back through because I was like, why do I even know him? Like, I know the name, of course. His Nemesis series, I kind of super love those movies. Like, I really do. The first one's great, and the other ones are totally serviceable.
Are those Michael Dudikoff, or those are, I forget who that is?
I don't even know who the
yeah,
no. No.
Oh no, it's just like nobody.
Yeah, right.
Not even the American.
Well, I think to speak to what you're saying, Steve, about and Doug, how the movie looks, I think it's sort of a calling card of Albert Pyun to approach his movie making like, let me see if I can get this thing shot, get all the footage I need in the time that I'm allotted for the money I'm allotted. But then, like Arcade, he kind of walked away from Vicious Lips. Like, the movie was finished, photography was finished and stuff, and then it was sort of like he's moved on to the next project by the time Empire even picked it up. And so he kind of dumped it on Razan Zingal, who's the editor, to kind of take this footage and then make it comprehensible, which is successful to varying degrees.
I would argue it's unsuccessful. I mean, the thing that and again, like you said, there's not much about this movie. What I really want to know is, what was this movie supposed to be? Because there are so many things that they could have done, or that I sort of expected, and I don't think it would have cost much money, that would be a better result than this. Like, I mean, and like initially I thought it was going to be a sort of one crazy night movie. We have to get this band to a gig. That's it.
Well, that's what it sets up.
I don't know why you can't do that. Like I don't know, a Modern Girls thing. Like, that's kind of what I was thinking from the start of this. The music, I kind of dug it. Like,
the music is great. The music's great.
It was really great. Like, I'm a guy that unironically enjoys Miami Connection for the music.
Yeah.
Like, after Slumber Party Massacre 2, I had to dig up Wednesday Week's albums because that music's so great. This movie really could have worked. I'm a target audience for this movie. I love girl rock bands. I love girl punk bands, ska bands. It's my thing. I was all in at the beginning of this movie, and it just falls apart once they
does. It does. But I want to just echo what you're saying about the music. I think most of the music is actually really good, and like it's now become, this is going to be near impossible, I'm imagining, but it's become my goal now to track this thing down on vinyl if there's a vinyl release of this, because I really want it. They can do a nice bright pink or red colored vinyl of this. Would be amazing. Mondo or Waxworks, if you're listening.
I'm sure this is dirt cheap right now if you want to pick up this license.
I'm fascinated by, I mean, I think it helps that it's girl rockers too. I think I sort of gravitate towards that as an aesthetic as well. But I'm fascinated by fake bands in movies. It's always an aspect, because most of the time it doesn't work. Like, most of the time the plot is sort of hindered on the fact that, like, this is the band that's the movie tells you this band's gonna make it big, and then you hear them and you go, that band's not making it big,
right?
Which happens all the time. I mean, I think of like just so many worse examples of fake bands who were treated to multiple musical numbers. Brings to mind Corey Feldman and the Eradicators from Rock and Roll High School Forever, which is, if you've never seen Rock and Roll High School Forever, it is just this weird vanity project for Corey Feldman to move out of the realm of kitty heartthrob into Michael Jackson-esque rock star, and
Yeah.
some of those songs are unlistenable.
And I if I had to guess about like what they're going for, I think it's kind of that. I think they want to go for kind of this like, oh my God, have you seen this like crazy movie about like these space punk girls? You know, it's kind of like a built-in cult thing, like already just in your premise. And, you know, I know this movie wouldn't come out for several years after this, but I look at this and I think this could have been like Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert in space. And I'm pissed now that like that wasn't what it became. Like, it's clear that they had like 15 minutes of a movie here, and then it's really bizarre the choices that they make. So I guess we should just kind of get into that. Like the central premise of this movie sounds incredibly fun. There's an all-girl punk band in the distant future who get a job going to play at this high-end club on a distant planet, and they need to like fly their spaceship and get over there. They bring in a new band member, a very naive high school girl named Judy Jetson, unironically just named Judy Jetson, and she signs up to join them. And so, you know, that sounds like, all right, we're off for adventure. This sounds fun. This could be a comedy. This could be a horror movie. This could be like a weird, campy, like sci-fi little romp.
I'm alone. Yeah, I'm alone watching this in my living room, and when they said Judy Jetson, I'm looking at my dog, being like, "Are you hearing this? This is great, right?"
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's shameless, and it's pretty funny that character's name is Judy Jetson. But that's about as fun. Like, and all of this early stuff is so fun. We get like boobed prostitutes long before Total Recall. We get weird.
No. This movie out boobs Total Recall by one, because that's a 4 boobed prostitute.
Oh, was there a 4? Okay, I didn't.
There's 4.
I thought it was only 3 as well. Oh,
I'm pretty sure it's 4.
I may have had one eye closed. I don't know, but
it's kind of a magic eye illusion thing. You have to just look at it just right to see the 4th boob. Yeah, no, I mean, there's all kinds of goofy, campy stuff like that. There's bright neon signs, and like the character of Maxine, who's played by Marianne Graves in this movie, she's only in like 2 scenes in this film, but she deserves to be kind of like a drag icon. Like I wish people were devising their drag acts around this character, because she's like this crazy like dominatrix boss bitch type who is so hilarious to watch. Her line deliveries are off the chain, and that's definitely the most fun I have with the whole movie, is watching Maxine. You know, so they're setting us all up for this amazing little fun adventure, and then the ship crashes. And we're like, oh, okay, well, I guess this is the movie now about like adventures on this crashed planet or something. Maybe they'll find a village of like oiled up studs or something, and they need to tame them. I don't know what kind of movie we're in for. The movie we're in for now is 4 women alone, trapped in a dark spaceship, bickering, going crazy, doing drugs, mumbling, and having
but you could do that. Like, you could even do that. That could be a movie. And again, I don't want to just reference movies I do on my podcast, but like Satisfaction, that's a movie that they're just hanging out for most of that movie. Not too many sets, band conflict, drugs are involved. They do everything and nothing at the same time. You could have done that. Like, you don't need monsters and aliens and dream sequence. Like, I don't like, that's where it all falls apart. Like, if you don't have the money, have a good script and just have these ladies have band conflict and talk about drug addiction and stuff. I know that that's not it's not what you expect when you're like, okay, this is a full moon movie, but I'm kind of here for it if the alternative is what I'm getting.
Right. It ends up, instead of becoming something like that, where that's like exploring that, you know, there have been a lot of great movies and great like plays and things like that are exploring the idea of doing nothing. You know, what happens when you do nothing? Whatever reason, I don't think this is even a great movie, but it's a better movie than this. The one springing to mind is Jarhead, which is a movie about a bunch of soldiers who are trained to kill and are slowly going crazy as they're just forced to sit around doing nothing all day. You know, that's kind of a fun concept to work with. And that could have been what they're doing here.
If their manager vomited up sand at some point in this movie, I would have loved it.
It'd be great. Yeah, do it.
Well, this is very much, in a lot of ways, I mean, it has all the hallmarks of an Albert Pyun movie, which is that there are shots in this movie, not based on shot composition, but based on aesthetics that are, and I use this word without hyperbole, brilliant.
Yeah.
Mixed then with complete incomprehensibility.
Yeah.
Because it's essentially a music video. It's a very music like there's a lot of this movie just feels like multiple versions of the imagination sequence from Flashdance.
Yeah,
Kind of
yeah.
over and over again with some weird little interstitials in it. And
but how much fun
fine.
would that be? Like, how much fun would that be if we do have just a character walk into a room and sort of break out into a full music video when that woman's showering? Why was she not also singing? I'd be totally fine with that.
Yeah. It's already just like a weird electron shower, just kind of like a weird Spencer's Gift optical illusion lamp. You know,
no, we move away from everything that works because early on in the movie we have, like you said, the introduction to the opening credits and then the introduction to, it's almost like there's a moment where it gets really kind of weird and surreal, and Judy Jetson is wearing a very tame like dress, and we're told she's a high schooler, and it's kind of like things seem a little off, like she's performing at Club Silencio.
Yeah.
And it's kind of weird, but then her audition part starts and it's silly, but then you're kind of thrown into seeing the other band members, and then she's done up like Ace and she starts singing that Save Me song, and that song rules.
Yeah.
And that part of the movie is so good that you're just like, I want this to go on for 80 minutes.
Yep. And
unfortunately, it doesn't. We end up crashed. We end up with a lot of just, and I will say this is one thing that is impressive for Albert Pyun to be able to get shots like this in a movie of this budget shot, which I think they said they shot this movie in 6 days, which
seems long.
Oh, really? See, I was saying that's impressive, but I guess you're.
It seems long. No, look, they left like flubbed line readings in this movie. Like they left. It feels so rushed. There was apparently such urgency to get this out that they didn't have time for a second take or a.
But they were able to get shots of the vastness of sand, which when we look at some of these movies like Ken Dixon's Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity, they walk for 10 feet and then it cuts because they're about to walk off of set. And they're about
to get the jungle gym in frame, and they need to go back.
Right. And we don't get that here, but unfortunately we get I can't think of another movie outside of maybe Outlaw of Gore where there is so much time spent with a whiny character fumbling around the desert.
Yeah.
And I just cannot stand that aspect. It's just so whiny and so annoying, and just that they finally give him like 2 scantily clad, eventually topless, like nymphs to take him away. And it's like, oh, this is how we're getting our R rating.
Maybe I was just really desperate at this point in the movie, but when he collapses and those ladies are with him and the first thing he does is pull out his business card, I really kind of enjoyed that.
Look, hey,
not every choice he makes is the wrong one, but he's kind of an annoying, whiny character.
Yeah.
Well, and we should reveal kind of the big twist of this movie, which is not really even all that surprising. It's just dumb.
And if you've seen a movie before, you know what the twist is. Like, I don't even know how far into this movie. I was like, oh my God, okay, it's a dream. Can we just, and I looked and I was like, how is there 25 minutes left of a dream sequence?
Yeah. Oh God. It all turns out to be one big dream. Judy Jetson apparently hyperventilated when she got named the new band leader, fell over, and then imagined this whole weird scenario.
She woke up as Balthazar Getty for a little while. It was really weird.
I mean, it's so strange. And I
don't know if you have Gary Busey on retainer, but if he was her father, that would be fantastic.
That really would be, actually.
It's one thing missing from this movie is Robert Blake.
Right. No, I mean, I can't imagine if you have a dream, like if your premise of the movie is, okay, you are now in a dream world, fine, okay, it's boring and it's kind of hacky, but play with it, show me some really weird stuff. Don't just show me incomprehensible stuff. I understand that's how dreams really are. Like, dreams in real life aren't structured with narrative, and not everything makes perfect sense, and sometimes they do feel like a series of non sequiturs, but that's not a fun movie to watch, especially if you're not like a David Lynch or something and have total kind of command of that tone.
I'm going to throw a question out there, and this could be for either Doug or for Steve. When you guys are waking up from a dream, do you see a title card that says dream over?
No, not usually. I mean, I don't remember a whole lot of my dreams anymore, but
that was a moment. I got a good laugh there. I was like, that's ballsy to throw that in there.
And I was thinking, like, there's little touches where I'm like, okay, this is a joke and it kind of works, I guess. But also, as you sort of said, like, she's even dreaming about characters that she has not met.
Exactly.
Steve, Steve, you talked about the woman who wants to sign them, or it's her club or something like that. She's dreaming that woman's there. She's never met this character. I hate that. I did enjoy when she dreams about the dead old lead singer. It's just painted blue. I kind of enjoyed that.
Yeah, that's fun. But no, exactly that. It's like she's dreaming about characters that she's never met. She's dreaming a whole side adventure for the manager, like when he's off in the desert. Like, it just reminds me of that Simpsons episode where it's the flashback, and they're like, why is there a subplot about Marge and Homer looking for the Lincoln's gold? It's like, well, the spirits thought the original story was a little thin.
Right.
That's what it feels like. It's just like, oh, okay, well, great. But it really adds nothing. It's like it's an attempt at some comic relief, but the guy's not funny. The fact that he's carrying around a bent cigar isn't really funny. And then I just, when we're stuck in the ship, I'm having just such a hard time telling the difference between who any of these women are. I'm having a hard time telling a difference between like what they want and what they like character motivations keep shifting. Like Judy is like the doe-eyed ingenue, and then she's like turning on everybody, and then she's back to the doe-eyed ingenue, and like there are cat fights out of nowhere, there are drug problems out of nowhere, depression, everything. It's all cycling through, just seemingly random.
When the one girl's arguing with our brand new lead singer about, oh, you think you're too good for us? I'm like, no, where are you getting this from? It comes out of nowhere. The arguments make no sense. And also from a costume thing, like, wigs on or off, ladies, because I don't know I thought at the beginning, I was like, is this even, when the woman's wearing the suspenders, I was like, is this just somebody who's working in the ship? Is this one of the bandmates? It was very confusing at times. And there's only 5 characters here. It shouldn't be. I should be able to keep track of who's who.
Well, the easiest way, I would say, Doug, for you to keep track of people is if you were wondering at any point, who is the character who is doing this entire role as if she's on Quaaludes? That's Linda Carriage.
Okay.
Who is so her story is she's Australian, I believe. And she was discovered in the late 70s and made kind of a career in the 80s of being a Marilyn Monroe lookalike.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And she plays a stand-in for Marilyn Monroe in a number of movies, most famously probably in a movie that I apologize in advance, listeners, is a movie that I don't like particularly, and you would think that it would be one I do, is Vernon Zimmerman's Fade to Black. She plays the Marilyn Monroe.
I saw that on her IMDb, and I was like, well, I'm not going to look into what character she was, but thank you for answering that question for me.
Yeah, she just, every single scene in this movie, it's as if they woke her up by telling her they were shooting.
Yeah, I also, her character, I was a little bit confused, like, and maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but it was about 40 minutes into this, I don't know, without credits, 72-minute movie,
maybe,
that I realized she has an Australian accent. I was like, whoa, wow.
She was trying real hard to suppress it.
I didn't know if she was trying to suppress it, but when it was there, it was there. It didn't sound like it was being hidden, but it was just for one bit of dialogue, and it really was shocking.
Well, I'm pretty sure in another movie that I know her from, she speaks with her Australian accent. Well, she speaks in Fade to Black with her Australian accent also, and I am sure she probably does when she's not actually playing Marilyn Monroe. But I recognize her also from another Albert Pyun movie, which is a movie I saw a lot in my youth, under the Mystery Science Theater version of it, which is Alien from LA.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, right. The Kathy Ireland one. Yeah.
So she's in that movie. I did want to say though, and I thought of this, Doug, because of conversations that you and I have had off mic before. This the FX in this movie were done by a bunch of people we've talked about, but one person we haven't mentioned who did FX work in this movie is a guy named Tim Surstead.
Mhm.
And he shot another movie, the FX in another movie that we like quite a bit. Do you want to take a guess what movie it is?
Oh God.
Was this for Doug?
Porky's 2.
Porky's the Revenge, yes. No.
No, I don't. Sorry, I don't even.
He shot The House on Sorority Row.
Oh. And we just talked about that recently, you and I.
How do we know she is alive?
movie.
Talking about line readings.
Can we just talk about that for the rest of the time? Can we just...
There's more meat on that bone, definitely, to talk about. Like that's the thing. We've exhausted all the story beats at this point. Like they wake up, they end up going to the club, and like basically she learned nothing. She learned nothing from this whole experience. We've gained nothing from watching it, and it's just life is back to normal. And it's just what was the point? Why I would have much rather just like a short film or a long music video.
That would be fine. Also, why does this movie need to take place in space / in the future? Like other than the guitars, whatever.
Well, that's why. It's because you want to be able to have instruments that are also bug zappers.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think
mosquitoes are a huge problem in the future. Yeah, they need to build those into everything.
I didn't think they looked terrible, but I was also suspicious of them because they never really showed the entire instrument. You would just get sort of the neck of these things, but also like everything they're wearing, it just feels exaggerated 80s. And if you want to put it in sort of a, I don't know, Streets of Fire, bizarre alternate reality, that's totally fine. But I mean, space, aliens, whatever. I don't know.
I thought about Streets of Fire a lot while I was watching this. I was like, because I was like, that doesn't take place in space, but it's in a reality that another time, another place, I think they say in the movie. That's the only backstory you get about where and when it's taking place, which is kind of cool.
It's like, I love that. That's all we need. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, that movie, even if that's one, I mean, obviously, bigger studio, Walter Hill and other people involved, and Jim Steinman writing those songs. So like if you say what you will about Jim Steinman, but he made a career out of writing like operatic, dramatic, cinematic rock songs in that way. And so that blend is perfect here.
But as we said, the music isn't the problem with this movie.
It certainly is not.
Yeah.
And it was done by a couple of musicians who went by a combo called Drock. And I forget exactly the name of the two separate, but I do know Susan Sad maybe is her name. Yeah. The woman who sang the Save Me, and I think the what was the name of the other song? Lunar Madness.
Lunar Madness.
Yeah, Lunar Madness.
That was the other one.
Which would have been a better name for this movie. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Well, so Lunar Madness actually was another name for this movie.
There you go.
Apparently, this movie was like you mentioned before, Steve, was not really released, and so in different areas, it was released under different titles, and so it was floating around the United States with copies. It wasn't really, like you said, released on video, but maybe it was prints, but it was known in the United States as Pleasure Planet.
Oh, right.
And then it was in the Australian market, apparently, as Lunar Madness. And then, also as Vicious Lips for its very limited theatrical release. And so I always enjoy a story like that, where it's like you get this, because I mean, that's happened before where we look at these titles and we realize, oh, that's why I didn't realize I knew this movie is because
Mm-hmm.
I knew it under this other name that I
Yeah.
saw, some bootleg VHS of. And the more we get into Albert Pyun stuff, and then when we get into our Tim Kincaid stuff that's coming up soon, this is something that's going to be happening quite a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I am so glad they did not keep Pleasure Planet in the mix there, because man, would that have been a misnomer. There is nothing pleasurable on the planet. There's 30 seconds of like imaginary naked ladies, but that's everything else is just yelling and darkness and some kind of weird sand beast that's there sometimes, sort of, kind of. It's like kind of menacing them and kind of not. I don't know. It takes a long time to kind of make its presence known after it's revealed, and then it kind of adds up to a whole lot of nothing. Because doesn't it just it's just the guy who is like Maxine's assistant, who again she's never met.
I don't know. Was that supposed to be him, that weird monster peeper? Like I
think so, because he's the one who's there when she wakes up,
right?
And she's like, what do you mean this is a dream? And he's like, yeah, and she's like, but you're so ugly.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
The thing that I was most curious about when I realized it was a dream is, when is this dream taking place? At what point in this movie? And I was really let down as to when she woke up, because I thought it would have been, and not that it would have saved it, but if she woke up right after her high school performance and she dreamed this whole thing and then is approached by the band manager and you realize, oh, it's just going to happen again or whatever. Okay, fine. We've seen that in movies too, but at least it's a little more interesting than we made it to the gig and at some point you passed out and now you just wake up in an elevator.
I mean, okay, so let's be charitable with all of this. And let's say
it was great.
This is a movie about a girl who is faced with the prospect of fame and then simultaneously has a panic attack and goes through all the different anxieties that she has about getting famous, whether it's betraying people that she came to rely on, or not being talented, or confronting drugs, or confronting conflict, or maybe if we're being charitable about it, it's that. But this movie does not convey it very elegantly. You feel like you just needed like another pass, another like 30 seconds, just maybe like reread the script. Don't just like type it and walk away. Like read it a second time. And get some of these things ironed out, because there could be something there.
I like that read, Steve.
Sorry, if they would have dug further into any of that stuff you just talked about, Steve, other than mad monster chases through, I don't know, abandoned warehouse basements or something, I think it would have been a much more effective film, even if in the end it all turned out to be a dream sequence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there are ways that you could salvage this thing and make it work. And I think if they just put like the tiniest bit of effort, but it is so interesting to hear that like Albert Pyun walked away from this one too. And that, I don't know, maybe that's just kind of his method. I don't know, to speak like, he just like,
well, his method is, I did it for under $100,000. I did it in less than a week. I got all the footage shot. Now turn this into something. Was essentially what. And the funny thing about Albert Pyun too is like, we're talking about this coming on off the heels of him having kind of a rough follow up to Sword and the Sorcerer, but like Sword and the Sorcerer being a big hit and people having a lot of faith in him, like. He got to shoot this thing in Laird International Studios, which was like Cecil B. DeMille's studio. All the RKO movies, E.T. was shot in this studio.
Right.
And it's like he got to work within these places that like a novice wouldn't necessarily get to experience. And he just sort of feels like a charmed guy who kind of fumbled his way into having access to all these things, like knowing a couple of the right people, turning out a low budget movie that was a sleeper hit. That was a big surprise. And then it's like he starts imprinting a little bit more of himself. And, it's very on the nose that like he clearly loves the neo-noir aesthetic and the idea of radioactive dreams as a thing. Like that motif comes back again and again and again. And there's always a neo-noir-ish weird dystopian feeling underlying in all of his stuff. Like even a movie like Cyborg, which is like Jean-Claude Van Damme is just future robot, somehow has this kind of like mythology in it as well. It's like he's someone who's confusing his aesthetics and his themes together. And he's just he's a fascinating person. There's actually a book about him, a biography about him and his career, and I actually think I'm going to buy it and read it, because I think one of the things you could sort of take away is it's like you look at all of the choices made in a lot of his movies, and it's like it's somebody who has this mastery of cinematic scope but no concept of cinematic storytelling. And it's really that marriage of two things in the same person is really interesting. It's like I've heard people refer to him as that generation's Ed Wood, and he's the generation before's Tommy Wiseau in some ways.
Right.
But I don't think Tommy Wiseau is capable of making something that aesthetically makes as much sense as Vicious Lips does at times.
Right.
Like I feel like that's just incompetence across the board.
Yeah.
And hubris, you know what I mean? And someone who's like, I've seen movies, I know how movies exist. There's a little bit to that too here, but it's like these little moments of where he gets it so right. And then as like a movie, by all conventional measure, it just falls apart. And I think that's common in a lot of his movies. And I think it makes him a really interesting case study for like,
it makes me wonder if it really is just the way his brain works, where like you said, like once it was done, he was gone. He was off to the next thing, which makes me wonder at what point does he become disinterested in what he's working on? Is it early? Is it too early in the process?
It's day 4.
Yeah.
Okay. So they took 2 days to build those guitars, then they started shooting.
Can we talk about those guitars for a second? Because
please.
I had the dumbest like memory to something from my childhood watching this, and I'm always fascinated when it's like instruments that exist aren't good enough. So it's like the one girl's playing a keyboard type instrument, which is almost like if you combined a pedal slide guitar and a theremin into one instrument, and it doesn't make any sense. But the guitars with the bug zappers on them, because of the way that the bodies are designed, it reminded me of, do you remember when the Ninja Turtles did the Coming Out of Their Shells tour?
Oh, I remember. I remember.
So they did a thing when they released a VHS, which was like them playing this concert for children at Radio City Music Hall. And it was, 4 guys in turtle costumes with like, one of them was like a little tiny drum kit with a couple of drums. Like, I don't even like all probably electric drums, electric cymbals, but there was, I'll never forget, they go out of their way to point out the fact that this ridiculously shaped bass guitar that I believe it's Leonardo is supposed to be playing. This guy who's doing like a fake kind of behind the music thing about them.
Leonardo, the leader of the Ninja Turtles, is on bass. I didn't see that.
Look, he's the Geddy Lee of the Ninja Turtles. But like he's this guy is doing this narration talking about how excited the world is for the Ninja Turtles to take over popular music as well. And he points out the fact that Leonardo is playing a 1-string bass. And I remember him saying, he's playing this 1-string bass, which is, a revolutionary way to bring all the notes of the spectrum and harness it into like a smaller, more compact body. And even at 10 years old, I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard a person say.
It's like, if you had just like told me he had a 1-string bass and left it at that, I wouldn't have questioned it. They're already walking, talking turtles, like we're fine. We're not going to start picking at the logic at it at this point. But you drew attention to it. You shone a spotlight on it, and now it's like, okay, now I have to pay attention how dumb it is.
Right. It's like I get it for aesthetics, but like dress up the headstock and the body of the instruments, but leave them as real instruments that exist.
That's the thing.
Life.
Some of these instruments, like, you don't really understand how sound is coming out of them, like based on the way they're being played or being held. And it's just because it's like, this is the future. It's got to be weird, but like, it just doesn't track visually. And
But it's the only thing that is the future. And I know it's a joke, but the fact that there's a set of keys in the spaceship, I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
What are we going to do, Doug? Push a button to start a vehicle?
Come on. That's far-fetched.
The way they're dressed, people are drinking out of what appear to be regular glasses at what looks like a regular bar. Like, it's just so funny to be like, well, we have to change these instruments because nobody's going to believe that this takes place in the future or on another planet if we don't do that.
Yeah. I mean, we even almost get some like great surrealistic moments when we come out of the dream and there's like this bizarre Kyoto Brothers designed alien MC that looks like kind of a stretched out sideways aardvark, I guess. It's really hard to describe, but
it's a cool design because the mouth part is an entirely different face that's talking.
Yeah.
That was super cool.
Yeah, no, there's some interesting visual ideas there, and it's almost like satisfying in a surrealistic way how that just sort of hits you like out of nowhere when you've just been looking at nothing for 45 minutes. But
I want to shout out. Yeah, I want to give a shout out to one of our old guests, Shay Mossifin, who was on our episode for Arena, because Arena, one of the things we complimented was how it was sort of like a giant cantina scene, and there was just all these different like creature designs just kind of hanging out.
Yeah.
And then there is an awful musical number in that movie in one of the bars, and it's almost like, and I think she said, she made a comment about how like it's a really weird musical number, and it's very similar to like a musical number from Vicious Lips if the music in Vicious Lips was bad. Which and she nailed it 100%. Like that, we would have done well to, again, if this is intergalactic and interplanetary and futuristic, like let's get a bunch of weird looking little creatures and have them then be in the audience for this. But it's not really concerned with world building in that way. It's concerned with close-up shots of the women in the band, like it is a music video. And that's, again, that's a choice, which we're being charitable with. We say, some of these choices, whether they were correct or incorrect. I feel like this is one of the incorrect choices.
Yeah. I guess so. And I didn't know how much of that was just to cover the surroundings that didn't look good, especially when they were in the ship. And maybe that was one thing. Maybe subconsciously I was like, this movie looks amazing because it's just close-up shots of beautiful women through the whole thing. Maybe that was why I was really kind of like blown away by the way this looks, because anytime there was more than two people in a scene, it was just kind of a bunch of trash strewn about.
Well, it's called set dressing, Doug.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
This is a professional production.
Oh,
on the level of, like I said, every RKO and Cecil B. DeMille picture out there, and E.T., especially E.T.
Oh, especially E.T. Oh, absolutely.
Got a lot of E.T. from this.
Yeah. I think we've probably reached about the limit of what we can talk about with Vicious Lips. Do we have any final thoughts that we'd like to get out there? Because we probably talked about this movie longer than anybody else in history.
My only final thought is I don't know how to feel about this movie, because I don't know if this is more egregious that I saw promise in this movie and it didn't deliver, or if 35 minutes of, as I said, like a 75-minute movie being watchable and entertaining actually makes this a movie that I would kind of recommend people watch the first 20 minutes, fast forward to the end, the two musical numbers at the end. I don't know. I really don't know how to feel about this thing.
I'm kind of with you, because I was so on board in the first 15 minutes for this to be like this next great like cult thing. I was like programming it mentally with like, oh, okay, I want to like show this next to The Apple from Canon Films, which is a movie I find so genuinely entertaining.
Totally.
I feel like that would make such a good companion piece. Or, and then I'm watching, I'm just like, oh, okay, there's actually nothing here. If I were to put this on in like around people, like people would leave. This is so boring that like nobody would actually stick around and finish this thing out. So I feel like that's the way it evaded kind of this cult reputation that should be built in. I mean, you tell me there's an Empire movie from 1986 about a girl rock band, and that this movie was pulled from theaters and never released on home video, and you tell me it has almost no cult audience. That's insane. And it's also a bit of a warning flag because, there's kind of a reason there's not really a lot to grab onto here.
I am going to err on the side of a recommendation for this movie. I think the first 15 to 20 minutes of this movie is incredible. I think some of the music is introduced and staged in such a fun way that, I mean, it definitely loses a lot of steam. And like you said, I think you find out pretty quick that there's really not much going on in this thing at all. And but I do think that there is an audience in the kind of the cult world of midnight movies for this. I do think at least 3 or 4 of the songs are legitimately good in the sense where they like they're good enough to sing along to. I mean, the words aren't super complicated, so you can figure them out during the song and bop your head along to it. I think there are things to mine from the kind of barren nature of the production that can be a lot of fun. I think laughing at some of the flubbed line readings and just sort of like, making and try to notice every time a wig is changed or a costume change happens that makes it impossible to tell who's who type thing. I think there's fun to be had here. And then just when it seems like, okay, we know where this is going. Great. Here's the reveal. Oh, there's still 10 minutes, whatever, 15 minutes remaining in this movie. Just when you kind of think like you're changing your tune on it, I think the Lunar Madness musical number in the end is enough to kind of bring it back strong. Like, I will probably watch this again. I mean, I can't say I won't fast forward through the middle of it, but I will put it on to watch these musical numbers for sure.
I will say, if I could just say one more thing, if like, I don't even know if this is Vinegar Syndrome or Severin level, maybe Terror Vision, something like that. If they were to put this out with a CD and they were to track down these people and their interviews, I'd be really tempted to buy this thing.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Like, I want to know a little bit about the method behind it. I know they interviewed Albert Pyun about this later. They showed him a clip. He had not watched it in like 20 years. And he just said, oh, yeah, that thing was bad. I had no idea what I was thinking. Like, so he didn't even really like remember what the thought process that went into the making of this movie is. He is one of those guys, kind of like Charles Band, who just needs to be working. He just needs to be getting something out all the time. And like, you can respect the drive. It's just, he's an interesting guy. And it might be one of the last times we talk about him too. I don't know if there's many more Pyun movies on our list.
Not really. We're getting towards the end of those, but I feel like it's probably my own personal taste too. But I have a really high tolerance for anything that is excessively 80s.
Oh, yeah.
And I understand that somebody probably doesn't. Like somebody who was born either 10 years before me or 10 years after me probably is incredibly tired of the 80s aesthetic.
Yeah.
And, it's not just a nostalgia thing. It's an aesthetic thing also. And I mean, this thing, from the colors and the costuming to the angular nature of the wardrobe, to the size of the hair and the instrumentation. I mean, it is egregiously 80s. And that's why I think it will have an audience, because I think you'll find enough like-minded people to find enough to enjoy in those aspects of it. Like, I feel like there's always something that you could kind of laugh at, if nothing else.
I think that this is if you're just hearing about this movie for the first time and you go all in for something like Liquid Sky, check this movie out. Like, you might kind of super dig it.
I can see it. I want to be there with you guys. I want to be there with it, but I just found
I
that
think I'm closer to you, Steve, honestly.
Yeah,
I think I'm closer to you.
I found this second act just so interminably boring. But you know what? Your mileage may vary, and I do want to hear everybody's kind of opinions on this too. And most importantly for Doug, this is now a movie you do not need to cover on your show. You can cross it off safely. We've adopted a similar model. If we talk about like a Full Moon or an Empire movie on another podcast, then we don't need to do another one on our show too. Because hey, both of us are covering a very large catalog on our respective shows.
I have to say, I'm not just a guest on your show. I'm also a listener. And when you went through your rankings, and right now I forget what the movie is. I have it saved in my phone, but you were like, "Oh yeah, we talked about this on a different show." I was like, "Damn it! Now I have to go. I have to find that show. I have to download that episode just so I can keep up." So
this number will probably grow, but as it stands now, it was two shows. It was Creepazoids, which we did with the Neon Brainiacs, and it was Ragdoll, which we did with Movie Dumpster. And so those two were on our ranking, but not, episodes that we put out.
Yeah, I think Creepazoids was the one I was thinking of. So very cool.
Yeah, but Good Times, Great Movies is a fantastic podcast. You guys have been doing it for years now.
So good.
What do you have coming up on the show so far? I mean, I think we're a couple weeks away.
Okay. All right. So, I will just say, listen, we just wrapped up April where we covered monkey movies for the entire month. We found a secret Dom DeLuise movie called Going Bananas with the kid from Over the Top, which and Jimmy Walker.
That's only secret unless you wasted your youth like I did.
Okay. I was surprised when we did that, the amount of people that were like, "Oh yeah, I've seen that 20 times." I'm like, where? Like, how is this possible?
Is that the one? Wait. I might be conflating that with another movie. Is that the one with Tony Danza in it?
No, that's Going Ape, which we did years
but Going
ago.
Bananas is the Dom DeLuise movie with the and Going Bananas is a different one.
Yeah, and we rounded out April with, of course, Tarzan in Manhattan, which was a I have to say an absolute delight. Like, just the last Tarzan movie we did was the one with Bo Derek, which was atrocious.
Your episode though for Tarzan the Ape Man, super hilarious. Really great podcast episode. So if anybody's looking for an entry point into Good Times, Great Movies, you should listen to the Tarzan the Ape Man episode, because holy shit, that movie.
Those Bo Derek movies, those were rough. But this one, Tony Curtis is in this TV movie. It's late stage Tony Curtis, and he is bringing it, like, not sleepwalking through this thing. He's having an amazing time during scenes acting opposite a chimpanzee. He really looks like he's having fun. It was shocking to me. So yeah, Good Times, Great Movies, wherever you're listening to this, just, I don't know, hit the link or whatever. If it's in the description and subscribe. So thank you guys.
Absolutely. It's one of the best podcasts out there. Definitely check it out. And thank you again so much for coming on and talking about Vicious Lips with us.
It's always fun.
Jared, where can people find our stuff?
Oh, thank you for asking, Steve. If you like what we do, you can jump onto Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave the show a nice 5-star rating and maybe a brief review if you feel so inclined to do so. You can follow us on Instagram at puppetmasters_Castle Freaks. You can follow me personally at _Giallo_Jerry, or Steve at Minotaur Matador. You can email us at puppetmasterscastlefreaks@gmail.com. And I will say that I think maybe starting in our next episode, I do want to bring in a little something that I would like to call Correction Corner.
Okay.
Where we can address things we fucked up on mic that some people have been gracious enough to point out to us. And so, we'll bring some of that maybe into play. But definitely, if we're describing something about a movie's production or history, and, you happen to know more about it or know people involved, and there's either cool tidbits of trivia or stuff that we, are getting the story wrong, feel free to write in and tell us that. We love getting any kind of feedback like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, our resources are limited in what we can research for these movies, and maybe not necessarily always firsthand sources. So yeah, we definitely welcome any corrections or any inside pipeline information.
Yeah, and if you don't want to email those corrections or comments to us, you can find us also on X, Threads, Blue Sky, YouTube. Comment and talk to us through there if you want to as well. But we are not the only podcast that Steve is on social media promoting. Steve, what else have you got going on?
Oh, I've also got a show called Cinema Arcade. That's cinema and arcade mashed together. We watch movies and then play the video games based on those movies. Let's see. This week, we just put out an episode on Beastly, a really terrible Beauty and the Beast YA adaptation from 2011, with one of the worst Wii games I've ever seen in my life. Pretty funny if you're an aficionado of really terrible chintzy games. That one's pretty fun one to listen to. And we've got episodes coming up on things like The Last Starfighter and Scott Pilgrim versus the World and a lot of other cool things. So definitely check us out wherever you find your podcasts. And be sure to stick around with this podcast because we've got actually a pretty great companion piece for this episode. Kind of the sunnier side of Vicious Lips.
Timing worked out really well for us on this one.
It kind of did. Yeah, it really worked out. We're talking about the movie Assault of the Killer Bimbos from 1988. Just one of the great titles in film history. And a movie that may or may not have been the secret inspiration for Thelma and Louise. We'll find out. We'll dig into it next week. It's a pretty wild time. Definitely check it out. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you later. Space Rock on.
Doug, I hope you recover from your bout of lunar madness.
Do you ever get over it completely?
You've got the long COVID of lunar madness. Yeah,
Right, exactly.